Behind the golden gates of Kensington Palace, two brothers who once stood united in grief now face each other as adversaries.
This
The
fighting
same
must
heirlooms that
stop.
once symbolized
The
their
crown
shared
jewels
royal
stay with the
heritage
crown.
have become
You mean they
weapons
stay
in a
with
bitter
you,
fight that
please?
threatens to tear apart the very foundation of the modern monarchy. What started as a simple discussion about their late mother's jewelry has exploded into a public spectacle that has captivated millions worldwide, revealing shocking truths about loyalty, betrayal, and the price of being born into royalty. This is not just another royal scandal. This is the untold story of how Prince William and Prince Harry's relationship crumbled over precious objects that carry the weight of centuries, and how their battle has exposed the dark secrets that the palace has desperately tried to hide from the world. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Kensington Palace as Prince William adjusted his tie for what would become one of the most difficult conversations of his life. It was 3 months after Queen Elizabeth's funeral, and the weight of his new responsibilities as heir apparent pressed heavily on his shoulders. The palace staff moved quietly through the corridors, their footsteps muffled by centuries-old carpets that had witnessed countless royal dramas, but none quite like what was about to unfold. William had called this meeting with his younger brother Harry to discuss the distribution of their grandmother's personal effects. What should have been a straightforward family matter would soon spiral into a public relations nightmare that would dominate headlines for months to come. The brothers had agreed to meet in the Oak Room, a private space where they had shared countless childhood memories, playing hide-and-seek among the antique furniture while their parents attended to royal duties. The irony was not lost on either of them that they were now meeting in the same room to divide up the very treasures they had once admired as children. The morning light streaming through the tall windows illuminated dust particles dancing in the air, creating an almost magical atmosphere that seemed to mock the tension building between the two men who had once been inseparable. Harry arrived exactly on time, his military precision still evident despite having stepped back from official royal duties years earlier. He wore a simple navy suit, a stark contrast to his brother's formal morning dress, and the difference in their attire seemed to symbolize the growing distance between their two worlds. The younger prince carried a leather portfolio containing legal documents and photographs, evidence of his preparation for this moment that had been months in the making. The initial pleasantries were strained but civil. Both brothers understood the gravity of the situation and the potential consequences of any misstep. William gestured toward the mahogany table where palace staff had carefully arranged dozens of items, jewelry boxes, watches, photographs, personal letters, and various other treasures that had belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth. Each piece told a story, carried memories, and held value far beyond its monetary worth. The Queen's famous collection of brooches lay spread across black velvet cloth, each one glinting in the morning light. There was the flame lily brooch gifted to her by the children of Balmoral, and the diamond rose brooch that had been a wedding gift from the Nizam of Hyderabad. These were not mere accessories but symbols of diplomatic relationships, personal achievements, and family traditions spanning decades. William began the conversation by acknowledging the difficulty of the task ahead. He spoke about their shared responsibility to honor their grandmother's memory while ensuring that the most significant pieces remained within the immediate line of succession. His words were carefully chosen, diplomatic in nature, but Harry immediately sensed an underlying message that would set the tone for everything that followed. The first disagreement arose over a seemingly minor item, a simple gold watch that had belonged to Prince Philip. Harry had always admired the timepiece during family gatherings, and Philip himself had once joked that Harry should inherit it because of his punctuality during military service. William, however, argued that as the future king, such personal items from previous monarchs should remain with the direct line of succession. This disagreement over the watch revealed deeper tensions that had been brewing for years. Harry felt that his brother was using his position as heir to claim the most meaningful items, regardless of personal connections or emotional significance. William, meanwhile, believed he was following proper protocol and ensuring that important royal artifacts remained where they belonged institutionally. The conversation grew more heated as they moved through the various items. Harry pointed out that many of the pieces had been gifts to the Queen from Commonwealth nations and held significance beyond the immediate royal family. He argued that some items should be distributed to various royal foundations and museums to share their historical importance with the public. William disagreed, stating that such decisions should be made collectively by the entire family and the royal household, not decided in private meetings between just the two of them. As the morning progressed, it became clear that this was about much more than material possessions. Harry began to express frustrations that had been building since his departure from official royal duties. He spoke about feeling excluded from important family decisions and accused William of using his future position as king to dictate terms rather than collaborate as brothers. The younger prince's voice carried the weight of years of perceived slights and growing isolation from the family he had once served so faithfully. William responded by defending his actions and pointing out the complexities of his position. He explained that every decision he made was scrutinized by constitutional lawyers, parliamentary advisors, and palace officials. The future king could not simply act on personal preferences but had to consider the broader implications for the monarchy's stability and public perception. His words, while logical, only seemed to widen the emotional gap between the brothers. The turning point came when they reached their late mother's jewelry collection. Princess Diana's engagement ring, which had been given to William for his proposal to Catherine, sat beside other pieces that held deep emotional significance for both brothers. Harry had always felt that he should have received the ring, as he had been the one to stay close to their mother during her final years and had inherited many of her compassionate qualities. The sight of the sapphire and diamond ring sparked a conversation about fairness and emotional inheritance that neither brother was prepared to handle diplomatically. Harry accused William of claiming the most valuable and significant pieces simply because tradition favored the elder son. William countered that he had tried to be fair and that many of his decisions were based on constitutional requirements rather than personal desires. Palace staff members who had been discreetly present to document the distribution process began to sense the escalating tension. Several longtime employees who had served the Queen for decades exchanged worried glances as the brothers' voices rose. They had witnessed many family disputes over the years, but the intensity of this particular disagreement was unprecedented in their experience. The argument reached a crescendo when Harry demanded to know why certain items had been pre-selected for William before the meeting had even begun. He had noticed that several of the most valuable pieces, including some of the Queen's most famous tiaras and state jewelry, were notably absent from the table. When pressed for an explanation, William admitted that the Crown Estate had already claimed those items as part of the official royal collection, making them unavailable for personal distribution. This revelation infuriated Harry, who felt that important decisions about their grandmother's legacy were being made without his input or knowledge. He accused his brother and the palace establishment of orchestrating the entire process to ensure that he received only lesser items while the most significant pieces remained under William's eventual control. The younger prince's anger was palpable as he realized that what he had thought was a collaborative family discussion was actually a carefully managed exercise in damage control. The meeting that was scheduled to last 2 hours stretched into the afternoon as both brothers struggled to find common ground. Palace staff quietly served tea and light refreshments, maintaining their professional composure despite the obvious tension in the room. The Queen's beloved corgis, now being cared for by other family members, could be heard barking in the distance, their voices a reminder of the woman whose possessions were now causing such division among her grandsons. As the day wore on, it became clear that this was not just a disagreement about inheritance, but a fundamental clash over the direction of the modern monarchy. Harry represented a more open, accessible approach to royal service, while William embodied the traditional institutional perspective that prioritized continuity and constitutional requirements. Their grandmother's possessions had become symbols in a larger battle over the future of the royal family itself. The first day of discussions ended without resolution, with both brothers agreeing to continue the conversation at a later date. As they prepared to leave, the weight of their disagreement hung heavy in the air. The items remained spread across the table, waiting for decisions that seemed increasingly unlikely to come easily. Palace staff began the careful process of securing the valuables, knowing that this was just the beginning of what would become a prolonged and very public family dispute. Neither brother could have predicted that their private family matter would soon become international news, or that their disagreement would expose deeper issues within the royal household that the palace had worked for years to keep hidden from public view. The seeds of a much larger controversy had been planted in that quiet room at Kensington Palace, and they would soon grow into a scandal that would capture the attention of the entire world. 3 weeks had passed since the brothers' first meeting, and the atmosphere at Buckingham Palace had grown increasingly tense. King Charles found himself caught between his two sons, trying to mediate a dispute that was rapidly spiraling beyond his control. The new monarch was still adjusting to his role and the immense responsibilities that came with it, making the added family drama particularly challenging to navigate during such a crucial period in his reign. The palace communications team had begun to notice unusual activity from British tabloid journalists. Phone calls were coming in with very specific questions about the Queen's will and the distribution of her personal effects. Someone was leaking information about the brothers' disagreement, and the royal household was scrambling to control the narrative before it exploded into a full-blown media circus. Sarah Mitchell, a veteran royal correspondent for one of London's major newspapers, had been working her sources for weeks. She had received a tip from someone with inside knowledge of the palace operations, suggesting that the royal brothers were engaged in a bitter fight over inheritance. The journalist's investigation had uncovered enough details to piece together a story that would send shockwaves through the British establishment and beyond. Meanwhile, Prince Harry had returned to his home in California, but the unresolved tension with his brother weighed heavily on his mind. He confided in Meghan about the meeting, describing his frustration with what he perceived as institutional bias favoring William's position as heir. The couple discussed the broader implications of the inheritance dispute and how it reflected the systemic issues they had encountered during their time as working royals. Harry's legal team in both the United Kingdom and the United States had begun reviewing the documentation related to the Queen's will and the traditional protocols governing royal inheritance. They discovered several precedents where younger sons had received more substantial portions of personal effects, particularly when those items had special emotional significance or personal connections. This research would later become crucial ammunition in the public relations battle that was about to unfold. Back in London, Prince William was dealing with his own set of challenges. As the new Prince of Wales, he was managing an increasingly complex schedule of official duties while trying to navigate the family crisis. His wife, Catherine, had become a crucial advisor during this period, offering both emotional support and practical guidance on how to handle the situation without damaging the monarchy's reputation. The couple spent many late evening hours discussing strategies for resolving the dispute while protecting their 3 children from the growing media attention. Catherine, with her background in art history and her experience with royal protocol, provided valuable insights into the historical significance of many disputed items and their proper place within the royal collection. The situation took a dramatic turn when Harry made an unexpected return to London, arriving without advance notice to the palace staff. He had decided to make one final attempt at resolving the inheritance issue directly with his brother. But his unannounced visit caught the royal household completely off guard. Security protocols required immediate adjustments, and the sudden change in plans created exactly the kind of visible activity that attracts media attention. Harry's arrival was quickly noted by the ever-present photographers who maintained constant surveillance of royal residences. Images of the younger prince entering Kensington Palace appeared on social media within hours, accompanied by speculation about the purpose of his urgent visit. The palace press office found itself fielding dozens of inquiries from journalists sensing a developing story. The second meeting between the brothers took place in a much more formal setting than their initial discussion. This time, representatives from the Crown Estate and the royal legal team were present, along with detailed documentation about the constitutional and legal frameworks governing royal inheritance. The presence of these additional parties immediately changed the dynamic of the conversation, making it more adversarial and less familial in nature. Harry had come prepared with his own legal representation, a move that surprised William and the palace officials. The younger prince's American lawyer, specializing in international inheritance law, raised questions about the transparency of the distribution process and the criteria being used to determine allocation of personal effects. This legal challenge represented a significant escalation in what had previously been treated as an internal family matter. The formal nature of this second meeting revealed the extent to which the brothers' relationship had deteriorated. Where once they had communicated as siblings working through a personal issue, they now faced each other across a conference table with lawyers and advisors present. The institutional machinery of the monarchy had taken over, transforming a family disagreement into a formal legal and constitutional question. Documents were presented showing the historical precedents for inheritance distribution among royal family members. The palace team argued that traditional protocols clearly favored the direct line of succession, while Harry's representatives pointed out inconsistencies in how these protocols had been applied in previous generations. The meeting became bogged down in legal technicalities and historical interpretations, with both sides presenting compelling but contradictory arguments. During a break in the formal discussions, the brothers found themselves alone for the first time since Harry's arrival. Without lawyers and advisors present, their conversation briefly returned to the personal level that had characterized their first meeting. Harry expressed his frustration with what he saw as institutional stonewalling, while William tried to explain the constraints he faced as heir to the throne. This private conversation revealed the deeper emotional wounds that had been festering between the brothers for years. Harry spoke about feeling like a spare part in the royal machinery, valued only when convenient for the institution but excluded from meaningful decisions about their shared heritage. William, meanwhile, expressed his own struggles with the burden of expectation and constitutional responsibility that came with his birth order. The brothers' discussion was interrupted by the return of their legal teams, and the formal meeting resumed with even greater tension than before. Harry's lawyer presented a detailed analysis of the Queen's known intentions regarding her personal effects, based on documented conversations and written correspondence. Several items had been specifically mentioned by the Queen in relation to Harry, suggesting that her wishes might not align with traditional inheritance protocols. This revelation created a significant problem for the palace team. If the Queen had indeed expressed specific intentions about certain items going to Harry, ignoring those wishes could be seen as disrespectful to her memory and potentially damaging to the monarchy's reputation for honoring tradition and family bonds. The legal implications were complex, but the public relations consequences could be devastating if the story became public.
William found himself in an impossible position. As the future king, he was expected to uphold institutional traditions and constitutional requirements, but as a grandson, he was also bound to honor his grandmother's specific wishes.
The competing demands created a dilemma that could not be easily resolved through legal precedent or traditional protocol. The meeting concluded without resolution, but with a new understanding of the complexity of the issues involved.
Both sides agreed to continue discussions through their legal representatives while exploring possible compromise solutions.
The formalization of the dispute through legal channels represented a point of no return in the brothers' relationship, marking the end of their ability to resolve family matters through private discussion and mutual understanding. As news of Harry's unexpected London visit continued to generate media speculation, the palace communications team worked frantically to develop strategies for managing the public narrative. They knew that any leak of information about the legal meetings would create a media frenzy that could damage the monarchy's reputation during a crucial transition period following the Queen's death. The irony of the situation was not lost on royal observers.
The Queen, who had spent her entire reign working to modernize the monarchy while preserving its essential traditions, now found her legacy becoming a source of division between the grandsons she had loved equally. The very items that represented her lifetime of service and dedication were now threatening to tear apart the family she had worked so hard to keep united.
Palace staff, who had served the Queen for decades, watched the unfolding drama with deep sadness. They remembered her constant efforts to maintain family harmony and her particular concern for the relationship between William and Harry. The knowledge that her personal possessions were now causing such division would have deeply troubled the Queen, according to those who knew her best. The second meeting ended with both brothers more entrenched in their positions than ever before.
The involvement of legal representatives and formal documentation had transformed their personal disagreement into an institutional conflict with far-reaching implications for the future of the monarchy.
Neither brother seemed willing to back down, setting the stage for a prolonged battle that would soon capture international attention and forever change the public perception of the royal family's internal dynamics. The leak came on a rainy Tuesday morning in November, just as London was waking up to another gray autumn day. Sarah Mitchell's exclusive story appeared simultaneously online and in print, with a headline that sent shockwaves through the British establishment. Royal Brothers at War, the secret battle over Queen's legacy. Within minutes of publication, the story was trending across social media platforms worldwide, and every major news organization was scrambling to verify the details and expand on the coverage. The initial report contained enough specific information to make it clear that someone with direct access to the private meetings had provided details to the press. Palace security immediately launched an investigation into the leak, reviewing communication records, access logs, and staff schedules from the days surrounding both meetings between the princes. The breach of confidentiality represented not just a public relations disaster, but a serious security concern for the royal household.
King Charles was informed of the media coverage while reviewing morning briefings in his private study at Clarence House. The new monarch's reaction was swift and decisive.
He immediately called for an emergency meeting with his communications team, legal advisors, and both of his sons. The situation had escalated beyond a private family matter and now threatened to damage the monarchy's reputation during a critical period of transition.
Prince William learned about the news coverage while having breakfast with his family at their Windsor residence. Catherine immediately recognized the potential impact on their children and began making arrangements to shield them from the inevitable media circus.
The Prince of Wales understood that his position as heir made him a primary target for public scrutiny, and any perceived unfairness in his handling of the inheritance dispute could have long-term consequences for his future reign. In California, Prince Harry was awakened by urgent phone calls from his legal team and public relations advisors.
The time difference meant that the story had already dominated British headlines for hours before he became aware of its existence. His immediate concern was whether the leak had come from someone on his team, as any perception that he had deliberately made the dispute public would severely damage his credibility and his relationship with the rest of the royal family.
The media coverage quickly expanded beyond the initial report as other journalists and royal correspondents began conducting their own investigations. Additional details emerged about the specific items under dispute, the presence of lawyers at the second meeting, and the formal legal challenges that had been raised.
Each new revelation added fuel to a story that was rapidly becoming one of the most significant royal controversies in recent memory. Public reaction to the news was swift and polarized.
Social media platforms exploded with commentary from royal watchers, constitutional experts, and ordinary citizens expressing their opinions about the inheritance dispute. Polling conducted within days of the initial coverage showed the British public evenly divided in their sympathies, with younger demographics generally supporting Harry's position while older citizens tended to favor William's institutional approach.
The international media seized on the story with particular enthusiasm, seeing it as confirmation of the deep divisions within the British royal family that had been rumored for years.
American news networks provided extensive coverage, often framing the dispute in terms familiar to their audiences through comparisons to wealthy family inheritance battles. The global attention transformed what had been a private family matter into an international diplomatic concern. Commonwealth nations, many of which had given the disputed items as gifts to the Queen over her long reign, found themselves unexpectedly drawn into the controversy. Several governments privately expressed concern about the fate of culturally significant objects that had been presented to the Queen as symbols of their ongoing relationship with the British monarchy.
The inheritance dispute had implications far beyond the immediate royal family. The Queen's former private secretary, Sir Edward Young, felt compelled to release a carefully worded statement addressing some of the media speculation. He confirmed that the Queen had indeed expressed preferences about certain personal items during her lifetime, but emphasized that these conversations had always been informal and were never intended as binding legal instructions. His statement, while trying to provide clarity, actually added to the confusion by confirming that the Queen's own wishes were now part of the disputed territory. Palace communication strategists worked around the clock to develop a response that would calm the media storm without admitting fault or revealing additional sensitive information. They faced the challenging task of defending the integrity of the inheritance process while addressing legitimate questions about transparency and fairness. Every statement had to be carefully crafted to avoid inflaming the situation further or providing ammunition for additional media coverage. The leak investigation quickly focused on a small group of individuals who had been present during both meetings between the princes.
Security footage was reviewed, electronic communications were analyzed, and each person with access was questioned about their contacts with media representatives. The investigation created an atmosphere of suspicion and paranoia within the palace staff as longtime employees found themselves under scrutiny for potential disloyalty.
Legal experts began weighing in on the constitutional implications of the inheritance dispute. Several prominent barristers published articles explaining the complex legal framework governing royal inheritance and the limited precedents for resolving such disputes. Their analysis revealed that the traditional protocols were more ambiguous than many had assumed, leaving significant room for interpretation and potential legal challenges. The Archbishop of Canterbury, spiritual leader of the Church of England, found himself in the uncomfortable position of being asked to comment on a family dispute that had implications for the institution he represented.
The monarchy's role as head of the church meant that any perception of unfairness or family discord could affect the church's moral authority. His carefully neutral public statements reflected the delicate balance required when dealing with both spiritual and temporal concerns. As the media coverage intensified, both princes found their public schedules affected by the constant questions about the inheritance dispute. William's official engagements became opportunities for journalists to ask about his relationship with his brother and the fairness of the distribution process. Harry, despite being physically distant from the UK media, faced similar scrutiny during his public appearances in California. The story took another dramatic turn when photographs surfaced showing Harry's legal team entering a specialist auction house that dealt with royal memorabilia.
Speculation immediately arose that the prince might be considering independent valuations of the disputed items or even contemplating legal action to force a public sale if the family dispute could not be resolved privately. Neither Harry's representatives nor the auction house would comment on the purpose of the visit. Financial markets began to take notice of the royal controversy as investors considered the potential impact on British tourism and the luxury goods industry. The monarchy's role in promoting British exports and attracting international visitors meant that prolonged family discord could have measurable economic consequences. Several analysts published reports examining the potential costs of a damaged royal reputation on the broader economy. The emotional toll of the public exposure became apparent during a rare joint appearance by the brothers at a charity event that had been scheduled months in advance. Body language experts and royal watchers dissected every interaction between William and Harry, noting their formal demeanor and apparent avoidance of direct conversation. The event, which should have focused on their shared charitable work, became overshadowed by speculation about their personal relationship.
Behind the scenes, family members who had remained neutral in the inheritance dispute began to feel pressure to take sides or mediate the conflict.
Princess Anne, known for her direct communication style and no-nonsense approach to royal duties, was reportedly considering a public statement calling for resolution of the family matter.
Her potential involvement added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. The media coverage also revealed previously unknown details about the Queen's personal collection and the historical significance of many disputed items. Art historians and royal experts provided context about specific pieces, their cultural importance, and their estimated values. This educational aspect of the coverage helped the public understand why certain objects were considered so significant beyond their monetary worth.
The image of brothers had been replaced by a narrative of institutional privilege and family discord.
The damage to the monarchy's reputation appeared to be accumulating with each new revelation and expert analysis. Palace advisors began to realize that the situation could not be resolved through traditional crisis management techniques. The combination of legal complexity, emotional intensity, and international attention required a new approach that acknowledged the legitimate concerns of both princes while protecting the broader interests of the monarchy. The challenge was finding a solution that would satisfy family members, legal requirements, constitutional traditions, and public expectations all at the same time. The pressure for resolution reached a breaking point when Parliament began receiving formal inquiries about the inheritance dispute from several members who questioned whether taxpayer-funded security and administrative resources were being appropriately used to support what appeared to be a private family legal battle. The constitutional implications of elected representatives questioning royal family financial arrangements created a new dimension of complexity that threatened to involve the government in matters traditionally considered beyond political interference. King Charles made the unprecedented decision to convene a formal family council, bringing together not just his immediate family but also representatives from the Crown Estate, the Treasury, and constitutional law experts. The meeting was scheduled to take place at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, away from the intense media scrutiny that surrounded London-based royal residences.
The choice of location was symbolic, as Balmoral had been the Queen's favorite residence and the place where she felt most at peace. The journey to Scotland became a media spectacle in itself, with news crews tracking the movements of various royal family members and their legal representatives.
Prince Harry's decision to fly from California specifically for the meeting was seen as a sign that he was taking the situation seriously and remained committed to finding a resolution within the family structure rather than through public legal proceedings. The formal family council lasted 3 intensive days, during which every aspect of the inheritance dispute was examined in detail.
Historical precedents were reviewed, constitutional requirements were clarified, and the Queen's documented preferences were analyzed by legal experts. The process revealed just how complex royal inheritance had become in the modern era, with competing demands from tradition, law, public expectation, and personal sentiment. During the first day of discussions, shocking revelations emerged about the extent of the Queen's personal collection and the informal promises she had made to various family members over the years. Several items that had been considered part of the disputed inheritance were actually discovered to be on long-term loan to museums or had been designated for specific charitable foundations and documentation that predated her death by several years.
Princess Anne played a crucial role in the council proceedings, providing first-hand accounts of conversations she had witnessed between the Queen and both grandsons over the years. Her testimony revealed that the Queen had indeed expressed specific wishes about certain items, but had also emphasized the importance of family unity above material considerations. Anne's reputation for honesty and directness gave weight to her recollections and helped clarify some of the more ambiguous aspects of the inheritance question. The second day of discussions focused on finding practical solutions that would honor both the Queen's wishes and constitutional requirements while addressing the concerns raised by both princes. A team of mediators, including former senior diplomats and constitutional experts, worked with the family to develop a framework for resolution that could satisfy all parties involved. A breakthrough came when William voluntarily offered to relinquish his claim to several items that Harry had specifically requested, in exchange for Harry's agreement to support the traditional allocation of the most constitutionally significant pieces.
This gesture of compromise from the heir apparent was seen as a crucial step toward resolution and demonstrated his willingness to prioritize family relationships over institutional protocol when possible. However, the compromise proposal faced immediate challenges when Harry's legal team raised questions about the long-term implications of accepting such an arrangement.
They were concerned about setting precedents that might disadvantage Harry in future inheritance matters or that might be interpreted as acceptance of unequal treatment within the royal family structure.
The most emotionally charged moment of the entire council came when both brothers were asked to speak directly about their relationship and their hopes for the future of their family. Without lawyers or advisors present, William and Harry had their first honest conversation in months, addressing not just the immediate inheritance dispute but the broader issues that had been driving them apart for years. Harry spoke about feeling like his contributions to the royal family had been minimized, and that his position as the younger son meant his opinions carried less weight in important family decisions. He expressed frustration with the institutional machinery that seemed to favor William automatically and concern about how these patterns would affect future generations of the royal family. William responded by acknowledging the pressures and constraints of his position while also admitting that he had sometimes relied too heavily on institutional authority rather than fraternal communication. He spoke about the burden of knowing that every decision he made would be scrutinized for its constitutional implications and his struggle to balance family loyalty with royal duty. The breakthrough in their personal relationship came when both brothers recognized that their grandmother would have been devastated to see her possessions causing such division between them. They began to focus on how they could honor her memory through their actions rather than simply dividing her belongings according to legal or traditional formulas. A creative solution emerged from the mediation process that would address both the practical and symbolic aspects of the inheritance dispute. Rather than simply dividing individual items between the brothers, the family council developed a plan for creating a memorial foundation that would house many of the disputed pieces, while ensuring that both princes had equal access to items of personal significance. The foundation concept would allow the most historically significant pieces to remain within the royal collection while creating a new institution dedicated to preserving and sharing the Queen's legacy with the public. Both William and Harry would serve as trustees of the foundation, giving them equal authority over decisions about exhibitions, loans, and educational programs related to their grandmother's possessions. This solution required complex legal arrangements to ensure that constitutional requirements were met while also honoring the Queen's personal wishes and treating both grandsons fairly. Treasury officials worked with royal lawyers to develop a structure that would protect taxpayer interests while providing appropriate funding for the Memorial Foundation's activities. The practical details of implementation proved almost as challenging as reaching the initial agreement. Cataloging and appraising hundreds of items required teams of specialists in everything from jewelry to historic textiles. Insurance considerations alone represented a major undertaking, as many pieces had never been formally valued for coverage purposes. Media management during the council proceedings required unprecedented coordination between palace communications teams and government press offices. The involvement of constitutional experts and treasury officials meant that traditional royal privacy protocols had to be balanced against government transparency requirements. Daily briefings were provided to trusted royal correspondents to prevent wild speculation while maintaining appropriate confidentiality about sensitive details. International reaction to news of the family council was generally positive, with many Commonwealth nations expressing relief that the dispute appeared to be moving toward resolution. Several countries that had contributed items to the Queen's collection offered to provide historical context and documentation that might help in the cataloging and foundation planning process. The final day of the council focused on implementation timelines and public communication strategies. Both brothers agreed to participate in a joint statement announcing the resolution, though the specific wording required extensive negotiation to ensure that neither appeared to have won or lost in the dispute. The goal was to present a unified front that emphasized family reconciliation and respect for the Queen's memory. As the council concluded, there was a palpable sense of relief among all participants that a path forward had been identified. The solution was not perfect and would require ongoing work to implement successfully, but it represented a genuine compromise that addressed the core concerns of all parties involved. The Balmoral meetings had achieved something that seemed impossible just weeks earlier, transforming a bitter inheritance dispute into an opportunity for innovative thinking about royal traditions and public service. The Memorial Foundation concept had the potential to become a lasting tribute to the Queen, while also modernizing approaches to royal heritage management. However, as participants prepared to return to their respective homes and responsibilities, everyone understood that the real test of the agreement would come during the implementation phase. The brothers had reconciled personally, but translating that reconciliation into effective collaboration on the Memorial Foundation would require sustained effort and mutual commitment to their shared goals. 6 months after the Balmoral Family Council, the Elizabeth Memorial Foundation was officially launched with a ceremony at Windsor Castle that marked both an end and a beginning for the royal family. The event brought together dignitaries from around the Commonwealth, museum directors, historians, and members of the public who had been following the inheritance dispute through months of media coverage. What had started as a bitter family feud had transformed into an innovative approach to preserving royal heritage while promoting public education and accessibility. The Foundation's first exhibition, titled A Life of Service, the personal collection of Queen Elizabeth II, opened to unprecedented public interest. Lines of visitors stretched around Windsor Castle as people came to see items that had been at the center of the international controversy. The exhibition's careful curation told the story of the Queen's reign through her personal possessions, providing context that had been missing from much of the media coverage about their monetary value. Prince William and Prince Harry appeared together for the first time since the dispute began, jointly cutting the ribbon to open the exhibition. Their body language and easy interaction provided clear evidence that their personal relationship had indeed recovered from the damage caused by the inheritance battle. Both brothers spoke about their grandmother's legacy and their commitment to ensuring that her memory would inspire future generations through the Foundation's work. The success of the initial exhibition exceeded all expectations, with visitor numbers breaking records for royal attractions and generating significant revenue that would support the Foundation's future activities. Educational programs developed for schools brought thousands of children to learn about British history, constitutional monarchy, and the Commonwealth through the lens of the Queen's personal experiences and relationships. International loan agreements negotiated by the Foundation allowed items from the Queen's collection to travel worldwide, strengthening diplomatic relationships and cultural exchanges with Commonwealth nations. The Foundation's approach emphasized collaboration rather than ownership, recognizing that many pieces held significance for multiple countries and communities that had gifted them to the Queen over her long reign. Behind the scenes, the legal framework supporting the Memorial Foundation had required months of complex negotiations involving Parliament, the Treasury, and constitutional law experts. The resulting structure created new precedents for how royal inheritance could be managed in ways that served both family interests and broader public purposes. Legal scholars predicted that the model developed for the Elizabeth Memorial Foundation would influence inheritance planning for wealthy families worldwide. The investigation into the original media leak had eventually identified the source as a junior staff member who had been pressured by financial difficulties to sell information to journalists. Rather than pursuing criminal charges, the royal family chose to provide support for the individual, while implementing enhanced security protocols to prevent future breaches. The approach demonstrated a more compassionate response to staff loyalty issues than had been traditional in royal household management. Media coverage of the Foundation's launch was overwhelmingly positive, with commentators noting how the royal family had managed to transform a damaging controversy into an opportunity for positive public engagement. The narrative had shifted from family discord to collaborative innovation, showing how the monarchy could adapt to modern expectations while maintaining respect for tradition and constitutional requirements. The personal relationship between William and Harry continued to strengthen as they worked together on Foundation projects. Regular video conferences connected them across time zones as they collaborated on exhibition planning, educational program development, and strategic planning for the Foundation's future growth. Their wives, Catherine and Meghan, also became involved in Foundation activities, bringing their own expertise and perspectives to various initiatives. One of the Foundation's most successful programs involved digitizing the Queen's extensive photograph collection and making it available online with detailed historical context. The project revealed thousands of previously unseen images documenting everything from state visits to family gatherings, providing researchers and the public with unprecedented access to visual records of the Queen's reign. The Foundation's educational outreach extended beyond traditional museum activities to include online courses, documentary film projects, and scholarly research initiatives. Universities around the world began incorporating Foundation resources into their history and political science curricula, creating a lasting academic legacy that complemented the public exhibition program. Financial sustainability had been a major concern during the Foundation's planning phase, but creative fundraising approaches and strategic partnerships had created a stable revenue base. Corporate sponsors appreciated the association with the Queen's legacy, while individual donors responded generously to appeals that emphasized education and public service rather than royal privilege. The success of the Memorial Foundation had broader implications for how the royal family managed its relationship with the public and its approach to transparency. The detailed cataloging required for Foundation activities had created comprehensive records of royal possessions that provided new insights into the monarchy's historical role and contemporary functions. International recognition of the Foundation's work came through awards from museum associations and heritage organizations worldwide. The innovative approach to making royal collections accessible while maintaining their historical integrity was studied and emulated by other cultural institutions facing similar challenges in balancing preservation with public engagement. As the first anniversary of the Queen's death approached, both William and Harry reflected publicly on how the inheritance dispute had ultimately strengthened their relationship and created opportunities for positive change that would not have existed otherwise. They credited their grandmother's continued influence in bringing them together, and inspiring them to find creative solutions to difficult problems. The foundation's impact extended beyond the royal family to influence broader discussions about wealth inheritance, family business management, and institutional reform.
Case studies of the inheritance dispute resolution appeared in business schools and mediation training programs as examples of how complex family conflicts could be transformed into opportunities for innovation and collaboration. Looking toward the future, the Elizabeth Memorial Foundation had established plans for expansion that would include additional exhibition spaces, traveling shows, and digital archives.
The brothers' collaboration had evolved into a genuine partnership that leveraged their different strengths and perspectives while maintaining their shared commitment to honoring their grandmother's memory.
The transformation from bitter inheritance dispute to successful collaborative venture had taken nearly 2 years to complete, but the results had exceeded the expectations of everyone involved. What could have been a lasting source of family division and public embarrassment had instead become a model for how traditional institutions could adapt to contemporary values while maintaining their essential character and purpose.
The story of the royal inheritance battle had ultimately become a story of reconciliation, innovation, and the power of shared purpose to overcome personal differences. The Elizabeth Memorial Foundation stood as a permanent testament to the Queen's legacy while also demonstrating the potential for positive change when families choose collaboration over conflict and public service over private gain.
As visitors continued to stream through the Foundation's exhibitions, learning about British history and the Commonwealth through the Queen's personal possessions, it became clear that the brothers' fight over heirloom division had produced something far more valuable than any individual treasure could have been. They had created a living memorial that would educate and inspire people for generations to come, ensuring that their grandmother's influence would continue to bring families and nations together long after the immediate controversy had faded from public memory.
The final irony of the entire episode was that the Queen, who had spent her life working to unite rather than divide, had managed even in death to bring her grandsons closer together than they had been in years. The items that had initially threatened to tear the family apart had ultimately become the foundation for a stronger relationship and a more meaningful legacy than either brother could have achieved alone.